Hi and welcome to the FPL Stats Fix for Game Week 34. In this week's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best premium defenders as we investigate big at the back. Hi everyone and welcome to the FPL Stats Fix for Game Week 34. I should say straight away, I am recording this video during the dying embers of Game Week 33. So I hope everyone has had a good game week thus far. I hope that the double game week has been positive for you, and I hope everyone kept Mo Salah in their teams. I would have understood the move if you hadn't have done so and you'd gambled, but he proved against just a terrible, rancid group of players in that Man United team that he is still very much someone we can rely on, particularly in home games. But in this week's video, I'm actually going to be taking a look at defenders and more specifically premium defenders. So the thought process for this week's video is that a lot of folks, I guess, are on wildcard or thinking about using their wildcard soon. And even if you're not, I think actually transfers, free transfers, even the use of a free hit chip as well, are really going to be looking at whether or not it's worthwhile ploughing that budget into the defenders. So we know we can select up to 5 defenders, and what people have been looking at and what I've been asked to investigate as well is whether or not it makes sense to use the majority of your funds to really take advantage of the stats and the points that these premium defenders have been picking up over the course of the season. So that's what I'm going to take a look at today. And the way that we're going to do it is break it down quite logically. So the first part of the video is just going to be investigating of all of the defenders, looking at the lens over the course of the whole season, which ones have actually stood out. So actually, is it the premium defenders who have actually kind of stood out in terms of the points that they've accrued thus far in the season, bearing in mind we're so close to the end of the season now. After I've done that, then I'm going to look at some tables that I've actually built in terms of, well, for the players that are around the premium defensive price point, so sort of below 8.5 million, Trent Alexander-Arnold being the most expensive, are those defenders actually the ones that are picking up the most points? We'll take a look at that and see whether or not that theory can be confirmed. Then I'm going to move on and actually look at which defenders in that premium price point have actually performed the best before we do a couple of comparisons as well to see whether or not there are players that particularly interest you. So that is the running order for this week's video. So let's get straight into it, guys. So start with one of my favorite features from fantasyfootballfix.com, which is the Optastat Sandbox. And what I've done here is just filter out, so forget the midfielders, forwards and goalkeepers, and just focus in on our defensive players. I'm including all teams here as well, but straight away I've gone for per game analysis rather than totals. And if I scroll down, I've filtered this on points. So this is the actual per game points that defenders, have picked up over the course of the season. Now, Ben Chilwell, we know, is nursing a long-term injury. He's actually begun some light training, so good news from an England perspective, I guess, in readiness for the World Cup, but not really relevant for us in FPL right now. If I just scroll down a touch more, though, you can see here the types of names that are beginning to feature. We've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, who's actually his price has gone up to 8.4 million, which is super high for a defender. I still think it's tremendous value, I really do. And then you start to come down and see that there is an outlier here in Kieran Trippier, who's joined partway through the season and has had a great run before he picked up an injury as well in the much improved Newcastle team. And then we get sort of down to the more familiar names like Andy Robertson and Cancelo, Sarr. I wasn't expecting to see him then. Obviously got the question mark over minutes as well. Reece James, Virgil van Dijk, etc. And these are all players that, guys, we are saying are in that premium bracket, right over that kind of 6 million mark. And is it actually worth picking it up? Well, what we're seeing here is outlier of Chilwell aside and Trent Alexander-Arnold, who I'm going to go ahead and assume is in the vast majority of teams at the moment. There are players here who are going to be looking to, or have so far this season, returned around a 6-point return per game on average over the course of the whole season. Now that's the equivalent, as we know, of a clean sheet at a team level metric with no bonus points and no other returns. No team is going to have got clean sheets in every game over the course of the last 33 game weeks. So to have actually returned on average the equivalent of that is super impressive. So the early signs are good that this is something that we should look at. Now, if I move on now, what I've built out here using the custom stats builder, so tool on Fantasy Football Fix, where you can actually create your own tables, and there are just a heap of different stats that you can include, metrics that you can include, and filters and what have you. So I've done this. I've made the table public, guys. So if you go over to fantasyfootballfix.com, you will be able to take a look at this table yourself if you want to. It's called Average Point Getters. So I've included all players, or all positions, I should say, in this one, guys, rather than just defenders. Bunch of stats that you can see making up each of the columns here. Seven stats shown across, again, the course of the whole season. And then I've just applied a cost filter here of 8.5 million. So only players 8.5 million or less. So that will include all of our defensive players, as we know. And at the moment, I'm just going to look at totals. I will change this, but if I scroll down so you can see this, give you guys a chance to digest that yourselves. But I filtered this on total points returned over the course of the season. And again, you can see here Trent Alexander-Arnold way out in front. He's almost reached that magical 200-point barrier for an individual already, which is incredible. I've included some other interesting ones here. So you can see the number of times he's returned 5 points or more in a 33 game season so far, 19. It's just super consistent, isn't it? Again, I'm expecting him to be in the majority of teams, but it just sort of highlights the value that we're getting from him. Now, Cancelo, similarly, been an incredible season for him in that Manchester City backline as well. But if we just scroll down a touch more, we can then see Jared Bowen from West Ham, a sort of outlier here in terms of a midfielder, and similarly Diego Jota. So there is a kind of spread here in terms of midfielders and defenders. But encouragingly, you've got those two at the top there. You've got Virgil van Dijk, Andy Robertson as well, who are sort of backing up that actually, if we just look at FPL points total and just look at that as a pretty basic metric, then it is encouraging. Now, if I change this to average per game as well, and do this again, filter on FPL average points per game, this is where you start to see the defensive sort of favouring aspects come into our analytical thinking now. So again, Trent, we can kind of assume that he's going to top a lot of these tables that I've built. Andy Robertson, again, those Liverpool fullbacks way out in front there. Well, not way out in front, but the only two who are going over that 6 points per game. Cancelo, Reece James back into the thought process now. He's now fit and available for Chelsea. And then, Virgil van Dijk, if we scroll down a little bit with those midfielders as well. So I took this, guys, as pretty encouraging, actually. If you think about this, we are saying all players in the game up to and including 8.5 million. You've got to really encourage the top three lockout defensive positions there. Top four, including Reece James as well. And Virgil van Dijk still approaching that sort of 5.5 mark as well. So to me, that suggests that this is something that does have merit in it. If we move on then and actually then say, okay, if we accept that, and actually we're going to start looking at the defensive players now, so the ones who have actually stood out. Again, this table, guys, is available at fantasyfootballfix.com. So as soon as the video's over, smash a like on the video, head over to fantasyfootballfix.com, and you will be able to take a look at this particular table. And that reminds me, actually, as well, if you do want to build out these tables yourself, this type of bespoke tables, you don't need to use the desktop browser any longer. The new Fix app update available on Android and iOS that I mentioned in last week's video as well does now allow you to create your own tables on the fly using your mobile device, and it's just awesome to be able to do that and have that freedom to be able to do that. So do check that out as well, but stick around till the end of the video because there's more interesting stuff to come. So I created this big at the back table. So now we're only looking at defensive players, so defenders. I've included 6 stats similar to the ones we just looked at as well. I've included some sort of attacking ones that are quite interesting as well. And just included all defenders, so no need to apply a price filter there. Now I've filtered this down to average per game. And you can see it's a lot of the names that we are familiar with that we've already talked about now. So if we just take this top down, you can see the ones highlighted are the ones that are in my team. That's the only sort of differentiation that you can get there. Trent Alexander-Arnold, again, name that we're familiar with in this video, I'm sure, and that will continue. Cancelo as well. Andy Robertson. Laporte as well, Reece James, and then you start to get down into some players we haven't talked about already, but the likes of Ruben Dias, who is now coming back from injury and represents another viable option there, 6.1 million as well. Marcus Alonso getting a lot of attention as well, and then we move down into the likes of Joel Matip, Gabriel Van Dijk, etc. But this I did find interesting, that those players are the ones that are really kind of featuring in terms of the average per game. Now, if I feel, as I mentioned, I did include a couple of that's filtered on expected FPL points, by the way, guys, as well. So that's what we're kind of looking at versus the totals that we got. So right around that 6 points per game. If you could guarantee that, and you kind of have been able to guarantee it for a lot of these players, you'd be so happy with spending that money. You know, if you were to invest the top 5 here, money, you'd only be looking at around 35 million of your budget, and you'd be playing all of them every single week. So it's a really interesting strategic point, as to potentially a different way to consider playing the game in terms of spending that budget on your defensive players, playing them in any game, irrespective of fixture. And I say we are looking over the course of 33 games now, and an average return of around 6 points per game, irrespective of fixtures, bearing in mind most teams have played the majority of teams twice. So if I filter this just out of interest on attempted assists, and again, you can do this with your own metrics that you want to, guys, using this tool, you will see, again, Trent and Robertson really do dominate. And we will sort of expand on that a little bit later on in the video as well. But super encouraging. Luke Shaw we can forget about because he's injured, and Man United are just not a team that interests me in any way. But I do find the Liverpool fullbacks there quite interesting as well. Now, in terms of shots, for the first time in ages, Trent doesn't top the billing. He's still close. He's still second. But it's 1 point. It's still over 1.5 per game. And Cancelo, some ridiculous numbers for a would-be defender there. But I'm just going to go back to have a look at the expected points, guys, and really this forms the basis for a comparison that I've done as well. So very quickly before I move on and look at that, I did just want to briefly use the fixture analyzer tool that we've used in other videos as well. So obviously looking to the end of the season now, sorting on defense difficulty of the teams that would contain sort of premium assets, it's only Chelsea that fix rates, I guess, in terms of the run-in. And clearly we've got the 2 doubles here that that would kind of back up that assertion. So clearly there will be interest, and there's already been an awesome video released by Ross FPL Raptor that's available on this fantasyfootballfix.com YouTube channel that I really recommend you checking out. It's awesome. It goes into a lot of detail on the Chelsea assets, but you can see that in terms of if you're looking at premium assets and you want to align it with fixtures, as all good managers should be looking to do, Fix is saying that of the teams that contain those premium defensive assets, Chelsea is the team to look at. Now, what I've built out here, though, is using the comparison matrix tool. I selected 5 of the players that we were just looking at. I arbitrarily did include Virgil van Dijk as the 5th, because I did want there to be some kind of comparison with Liverpool. And I've also taken the executive decision to not include Trent Alexander-Arnold here, guys, because I do assume that he is in the vast majority of teams. And if he's not, it makes total sense to get him. So I've included here the full game week range, and the game week is still ongoing. So there are some games still to be played this evening, but I still think the sample size is more than enough here, guys. So Cancelo, Robertson, Laporte, James, and Van Dijk make up the pool of players, and I'm showing averages per game. It defaults to totals. And you can see there that the prices are going to range from 7.1 million, 7.3, 5.9 million, 6.3, 6.8 million. So, you are going to be paying a lot for these premium assets, as we know, or comparatively for their defensive peers. But, compared to the midfield options and forwards, it's not a lot of money. And as we saw when we did the analysis earlier on in the video, they compare really favourably to the, to the players in different positions. So I've included a bunch of attacking stats here, and you can see the starred ones here are the ones that stand out. So, minutes played, not a great difference here. Obviously, Reece James has had some untimely injuries as well, but Van Dijk is an assured selection there. If we start to scroll down and have a little look at some of the other ones, you do start to see a bit of a trend here for Andy Robertson coming out on top. So just in terms of the points, they're all pretty consistent, but, going over the 6 points per game is so impressive. BPS, a nice underlying metric there that does align itself to more points off the back of the result as well. Robertson is favoured there. Goals is quite interesting in that you're not kind of expecting these players, as attacking as they can be and as great pointers they've had. It's actually like the goals, they are still defenders broadly, but you've actually got like Reece James way up front with his huge hauls that he's had in the season. So that's something to consider, as I say, especially when you look at those fixtures that I mentioned. FPL assists, look, there are some very similar numbers here, 0.3, 0.4, 0.3 again, between Cancelo, Robertson and James there. But again, Andy Robertson does just shade that as well. And then shots, I mentioned previously that Cancelo is just a beast on the number of shots he gets, not just for a defender, but for any type of player per game. That's just incredible numbers that you're seeing there. Attempted assists and penalty area actions, though, this I did find quite compelling in the case of Andy Robertson. So if you are looking for that third Liverpool player, guys, to supplement, I would assume, Mo Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold, what we're suggesting here, this comparison matrix is backing up from the common attacking stats that Fix allows you to select that he is someone who's definitely worth considering. And I thought, just as the final point on this video, I thought I would draw out a comparison here to see whether or not there's anything else that kind of leads you or leans you either way. So I've included Cancelo here and Robertson as the player heat map comparison. So again, I've taken the whole course of the season here, guys, and heat maps that we've used in the past as well. It's as you would expect with Robertson operating on that left hand side, the majority of the action in the opponent's half there is great to see. Cancelo a bit more varied, having to play both sides on both flanks over the course of the season, but lots of in penalty area actions for Cancelo. Although to be fair, there is still some for Robertson. We've mentioned if you're looking at shots, then there's only one winner. Cancelo dominates completely. But if I scroll down, you can actually see now the average attacking radar per 90 as well. It's not completely clear cut. There's not a definitive winner here, so it's going to come down to your interpretation as to whether or not you favour, for example, attempted assists, crosses, XG, etc. And if I scroll down, we've got the totals here, which is quite interesting. And then if I scroll down further, you've actually got the average stats per 90, with blue being the winner. And you can see actually that there is a really clear split, I guess, in terms of what do you favour as an FPL manager. Are you someone that's looking more at the defensive player who's going to be taking that direct route to goal in terms of the shots that they're taking, shots in the box, shots on target, expected goals, etc., versus the more kind of creative output here for Andy Robertson dominating. So, horses for courses, I guess, in many ways, but it's the type of thing that from a statistical perspective, depending on the type of manager that you are, guys, you may have more of a leaning towards the more creative player. You think that would be a better avenue to points, bearing in mind the players that he's creating for as well in that awesome Liverpool team. Something for you to consider. But for what it's worth, guys, I really do think that this approach to big at the back is something that we should absolutely be looking to do as FPL managers as we close out the season. The evidence is there, guys, that there are great returns to be had on average over the course of the season, irrespective of fixtures for these type of players. So it does sort of back up the theory that you should be spending or could spend your money and your budget on there. I think I looked earlier, and if you'd selected the top 5 point getting defenders, you would be looking at a total of over 800 points from those players alone if you never captained them. And that to me is great value over the course of 33 game weeks as well. So lots to consider there. Hopefully it has been helpful for you, but it's certainly something that I would advocate doing ongoing. So that's going to wrap it up, guys, for this week's video. Do please smash a like on the video before you leave. Do please leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let us know if you're enjoying the content. Let us know if you are enjoying the new app as well, and stick around, lots more to come. Do please check out all the other content on the channel. There's loads more to come. Have a great game week 34. I hope game week 33 does end well for you, and I will see you all next week.